Well, let's pick a title. So I get to write down things that you've said that would make a good title. And every one of our titles has come from words said by the guest. So just chronologically.
Chicka Bow Wow better be on that list.
Chicka Bow Wow. The very thing I've tried to get away from.
It isn't. But we could. You said it.
I'll just leave it in the bloopers.
All right. Let me know which of these is your favorite. We'll use that as the title. So, like a sitcom, but with demons, an unlimited special effects budget, bringing together the right team. I'm in. I want to see that. I don't shy away from the kisses. Write stuff and finish it, or perfection is the enemy of done.
Ooh, so perfection is the enemy of done. I like, of course, but there's that second. Read them again because there was one that I thought also was.
So, like a sitcom, but with demons, an unlimited special effects budget.
I kind of like that too. I mean, that sort of is. I mean, for the focus on comics and stuff here. Mm-hmm. I mean, that focuses on the comics, whereas the enemy of done is sort of generic writing, but I think.
But since it's comic related, it's also the hero and the villain in those two things. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So the other one that I thought was particularly appropriate, because you can hear it both ways, bringing together the right team, both your production team and your superhero team.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think bringing together the right team or an unlimited special effects budget, either one of those I'd be happy with.
I like them both. Which is your favorite?
I think it's more provocative to say unlimited special effects budget. So let's.
Got it. Okay. All right. Baz, you're still recording?
Go ahead.
Season 6, episode 35, an unlimited special effects budget. This is Written on the Edge. I'm Ben Sebastian here with my co-host, I say Baz Collins.
Hello.
And we're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today is Alex Woolfson. Alex writes and publishes gay male action romance comics for cool people. As a gay kid growing up, he never got to see what he wanted to see. That is science fiction and action stories with heroes, real heroes, who just happened to like other guys. So after a successful career as a filmmaker, he started making these comics. In particular, he wants to make comics that are just as good as what the straight boys get, but for us. Now, with the support of readers on Patreon, it's his full-time job. He loves to talk about sci-fi, productivity apps, and other geeky stuff too. Alex, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So where did the fire come from? I mean, you got a little bit in your bio there, but to leap from filmmaking to comic making, there's a story there.
Yeah, there definitely is. The basis of all of this is writing. So I've always written. So even when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I would like dictate stories to my mom, who was very patient, as I talked about, detective stories and all that. And then, I wrote short stories in middle school. And then when I was kind of the big turning point for me in terms of my writing was in high school. I was a big drama geek. I did all the drama stuff. I think you guys understand, right?
Yeah.
And
jazz hands.
in where I grew up in Burlington, Vermont, there was a program where the seniors got to direct a play. Basically they called it one act, and you got to, at the end of the year, they had a stand-up drama, then they did a musical, and at the very end of the year, the seniors got to direct one act plays, and that was sort of the thing. And I was aware of that, and when I was a senior, I'm like, okay, well, I not only want to direct something, I want to write the thing I'm going to direct. And so the drama teacher's like, no, we're not going to let you direct what you write. That's uncool. But you can write something, and we'll let you do that. So I wound up directing whatever that was, where everyone gets stoned in like Salem, The Crucible. I wound up directing.
Oh yeah.
Whatever that was, and but yeah, but I did a comedy, and it had, it was like a sitcom, but with demons. And just hearing the audience laugh at my jokes, I mean, once you heard that, there's kind of no going back.
Right.
And so, I wrote another script and did some stuff in colleges, directed some more stuff. And then after college, I really wanted to create a, basically be a filmmaker, because my friends this is sort of in the beginning of independent film. I mean, this is back enough in the day that when I was learning independent film, I was learning 16 millimeter. I mean, that was the stuff I was learning, but it was I also at the same time was learning to become a digital film editor using a program called Avid. So to kind of wrap this up into a bow, I mean, I wrote short films, I directed a couple of them, and then I wrote a script that was longer. It was not quite short film length, and it was not quite feature film length. It was sort of just the wrong size. And that is actually the script that became Artifice, which is my first graphic novel.
Very nice.
And, I budgeted Artifice out, and I was pretty much going to make it anyways, on the credit cards and all that. But then I kind of was looking towards the long view of the kind of stories I wanted to tell. And the kind of stories in particular I wanted to tell were sort of these big budget action things. And, there's only so far you can get with your credit cards. And even with digital technology, which was coming up back there, there's only so far you can get. But with comics, you get an unlimited special effects budget. And
That's right.
And the length can be whatever you want it to be. And so that really dovetailed with some of the other things that you had mentioned, which is that growing up, I never got to see the stories I wanted to see. And this was a way for me, and it was kind of a double whammy of one, wanting to see heroes, who were true heroes, but also got the guy and also lived through the whole darn film.
Thank you.
And equally important, to also be really high quality production value. Not to knock, experimental and independent. I mean, that's great. But what I was really wanting to do was create something that rivaled or exceeded what the mainstream houses were doing. And so I realized with comics that was a way to do that. And so in 2006, oh my gosh, so long ago, 2006, I just knuckled down and really studied how to make comics. And I wound up hiring an artist, and I started short. I started with a 16-page comic, and I had a really good experience with that. And then the very next comic I made was Artifice.
Nice. Let's talk about it.
Sure. So Artifice was my first graphic novel. To give a description of it, Artifice is about Deacon, who's a prototype android soldier who sent on his very first mission, and he has failed spectacularly. Not only did he let one guy live, he also attacked the team sent to retrieve him. So now the corporation has hired the brilliant robo-psychologist Dr. Clarice Maven to try to figure out what went wrong. Deacon seems desperate to try to hide the truth of what really happened on Da Vinci 4. But how is he going to be able to fight an adversary who can literally control his every move? So at 88 pages, Artifice is a pretty quick read. It's a really good introduction to my work. I've created a trade paperback with the help of Kickstarter and my wonderful readers that I'm really proud of. So I really think that's fantastic quality. And of course, like almost all my comics, you can read the entire thing on my website for free, start to finish.
Very nice.
Excellent.
So is there more to the Artifice story? Is that just going to be a standalone and you're good with that?
I am good with that. I mean, it's an interesting story because it was my very first experience, and I was working with Winona Nelson, who's a fantastic artist, and she did all the art from thumbnails all the way through finished colors. She also hand painted the cover. Like if you look at the cover of Artifice, which might be floating in front of us right now, that's actually an oil painting, hand painted oil painting that she painted. Wow. Like she's brilliant, was a delight to work with. And, of course, she went on to bigger and better things than working on, just my independent comic. She then wound up working for Magic the Gathering. Even sure you're familiar with those cards. So the art on that, I mean, that's sort of like if you're doing concept art, that's sort of the pinnacle of in terms of commercial work that you can do, because, you get thousands and thousands of dollars per piece. And so, my feeling was I didn't want to continue Artifice without Winona. And then, basically my attention shifted over to the Young Protectors. And so once that had happened, I will never say never, and certainly there's lots of readers who write to me and say, can there be Artifice too? And if you pay very close attention in the first pages of the Young Protectors, you'll actually see a little call out, little fan service for that. Cool. But ultimately, it's sort of like a shark. You got to keep moving forward,
right?
To keep progressing.
All right. Yeah. So the Young Protectors, where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so the idea for the Young Protectors. So should I give the general pitch for the Young Protectors?
Yeah, that'd be a good way to start.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll talk about where the idea is, because that's pretty relevant. And also, I think it's relevant for other writers, because I get a feeling like maybe at least some percentage of your audience is going to be other creators.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I can talk about what I did right and what I wish I had done differently, right?
Sure.
So the Young Protectors. The Young Protectors is about a young superhero team, the only team in my world that's not under direct government control. And the first story arc of the Young Protectors is called Engaging the Enemy. And that begins with Kyle, who is a young firebending superhero who finally gets up the courage to step into a gay bar. Unfortunately for him, the moment he steps out of that gay bar, he runs into the most dangerous supervillain alive, the Annihilator. And the deal he has to strike with the Annihilator to keep his secret leads him and his team down a path fraught with danger, adventure, and some unexpected romance.
Wow.
At this point, I've published over 800 pages of the Young Protectors. So the Engaging the Enemy arc is actually complete. That's a complete story now. I do have the first volume of the Engaging the Enemy arc that's already been published. Of another Kickstarter thing I did. And you can also, I'm also proud of that. You can, again, read the whole thing for free online on my website. And since then, I've also done 2 more completed Young Protectors arcs, Legendary and Spooky Jones' Past Sins. So those are with different characters. And then there's 2 ongoing arcs. There is my main arc, which is Double Cross, which features some different heroes. And then there's a side arc called Fallen. And then just to bring in the full information, so the artists on the main arcs are Adam DeCrocker, who does the line work, and he's worked for like DC and Marvel and a bunch of others, and then Veronica Gandini, and then for the side arc Fallen, that's Gabriel Mayorga, who's doing the line work on that, and then Veronica Gandini does the colors for all of it.
Nice.
So,
yeah,
it sounds like a great team. Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm really lucky with that team. I feel I don't know if you've had a chance to look at any of the pages or anything like that, but I'm really proud of the work we're putting out. So
I did start paging through it to get ready for this episode. So the artwork's fantastic.
Yeah, no, and they're a dream to work with, and yeah.
Well, that's always a good thing when you have a really good creative team that are on board with what you're doing, and you're not having the struggle of trying to get that kind of thing going. If they're really all together in on it, I think it shows in the work. So. Kudos to you for that.
Well, thank you. I think, I agree with that 100%. In the show notes that you sent, you brought up like sort of working with artists is one of the things. And so what I do is I write the stories. So I come up with all the story ideas, I write the full scripts. And so full scripts include, how many pages are on the comic, how many panels are on each page, what is in each panel of the page. So it's not just like I'm writing something on the back of the napkin and handing off to an artist. I mean, everything is very detailed. And of course, all the dialogue, that's also what I write. And then I'm the art director. So then I art direct the artist, and then it comes back to me, I do the lettering, and then I publish and do all that other stuff. But in terms of being an art director is very similar in my experience to also being a director of theater and also being a director of films. And really, the most important job you can do as a director is bringing together the right crew, bringing together the right team, and then like that's 90% of it. And then, then 3% of it is making sure that you have the right answers when, if they're like lost or if they need some help or if we seem to be drifting off course. But almost all the rest of it is just getting out of the way and letting them do their fantastic job, letting them do the job that you brought them in for. And really with artists I've worked with, that's mostly what I'm doing is just saying, great job, and getting out of the way. So.
Nice.
Good team.
All right. So you promised you'd tell me where this idea came from.
Yeah. So, and this will lead into things you should not do, or at least things not do. I mean, again, looking back, I mean, it's a little like, you guys like watching Star Trek, like Next Generation?
Oh yeah.
We're all in.
Okay, all the way through to current.
So one of my favorite episodes is Tapestry. and that's a Q episode. And it has this message that basically Picard gets a chance through Q to go and change his past and fix the mistakes that he has regrets over as an older man. And he gets to do that. And of course, his whole life unravels. That some of the mistakes are some of the things that we grow from and we learn from and then become who we are, right? So I'm not saying that I'd go back in time if Q were to help me to do that, but it is something I want to avoid in the future. So with all that preamble, basically, I'd released Artifice, and it was being put online. And there was a comic book store in town. I live in San Francisco, and there was a comic book store that had 2 gay owners, and they were very cool. And they were wanting to publish sort of an anthology of local creators. And so they asked me to do that. And at that point, for a variety of reasons, mainly because I wanted to make sure that it was clear that my stories were not just inside baseball, that it was for both women and men to enjoy. I was calling my work yaoi. It really wasn't yaoi. And for those who don't know what yaoi is, it's a form of Japanese manga that focuses on male relationships, usually written by women, but the primary audience is women for that, right? So I decided to come up with a balance of both the sort of yaoi trope that I had seen in other works, and then also on top of that, this particular owner was a lover of superheroes. Like, he loved superhero stuff. And so what I did is I tried to do a short comic that was a melding of both those things. So basically, you have the situation where you have this older supervillain and this younger superhero, and there's a little bit of romance that goes on between them in a back alley. So it's relatively provocative stuff. And in general, I don't write to provoke. Some people do that. They want to be provocative. That's not really my thing. But, this is just supposed to be this short, silly comic that I was doing that was going to be, that maybe nobody was going to see, that was just going to be part of this local thing. Mm-hmm. So that's where so I needed an artist for that. And as I mentioned, Winona was moving on to bigger and better things, so she was finishing up Artifice, but even still, she was wanting to go on to bigger and better things. And so that's when I actually got hooked up with Adam DeCrocker, who had worked on Marvel and DC stuff like Teen Titans and, that kind of thing. And then also Veronica Gandini. And we were working on this comic together, and the relationship was really good. I was enjoying it. And then when I'd released Artifice, this is the first time I ever released a comic as a web comic. So I was posting it up originally 1 page a week. And then I had a little tip jar that said, whenever we hit like $200, I'd post a second page of the week. And so, it took like 3 months before we hit that tip jar. And then the next one was like a month and a half. And then I reached the sex scene in Artifice. And then it was every week I was getting hit on that. And then I figured, okay, well, that's a sex scene. It's going to stop. But then readers got hooked on it being a 2-page-a-week comic. So then there were just readers who stepped up and donated. And so I realized, well, heck, this is kind of an ongoing concern. I should probably be making webcomics. I don't have another story. Like, Artifice was meant to be a complete story. I don't have another story. Well, I do have this short superhero thing. I wonder if I can come up with a longer story with that. So I went back to my writing cave. I, really said, can I turn this into a long, basically feature-length story? And I came up with an idea of how I could do that and what that would be about, and so on and so forth. So that's what I wound up doing. So that was the birth of Engage the Enemy. The challenge, of course, was the way I started was not the kind of story I really wanted to tell over a feature-length story. It was just supposed to be this silly thing that was really a comment. A one-off, and a comment on yaoi tropes, particularly, I'd say the trope of dubious consent, which is, something that I was making a comment on, whatever else, right? It was not something I was really looking to explore deeply. And the bigger stuff I wanted to explore, which is questions of heroism and the power of friendship and the coming of age thing, I basically had to take this one idea and then move it over to this other kind of story I wanted to tell, which is like grabbing an aircraft carrier in your 2 hands and trying to twist it over to a new island. And again, I think because both of you are writers, I think you'll understand it when I say that, what genre really is a promise. Mm-hmm. It is an emotion. It is a promise to the readers for an emotional experience. And, you can write whatever genre you want. One's not better than the other, but you better be clear, like particularly in your marketing materials, what genre it is, or else you're going to have very unhappy readers. Like if somebody coming home, whether it's TV or novels or whatever, like if you come home from a hard day and you're looking to, turn on a sitcom and just laugh away your troubles, and then they kill off the main character in the middle of the episode or something, you have every right to be cranky about that, even if it was for artsy reasons or whatever. You when you want the wire, you want the wire. When you want, whatever. When you want a sitcom, you want a sitcom. And so what wound up happening is people read the first few pages of my story, and rightfully they think that it's going to be like older supervillain, younger superhero, chicka chicka bow wow kind of story. And that's very much not what it turns out to be. So one or two, basically some people stick with it, and particularly people who start with Artifice, because they kind of know what my deal is, and I've earned some trust that way, which is one of the reasons, like when I have an email tour that kind of leads people through my comics, that's why I always start with Artifice. It's like, this is sort of the purest distillation of what I can do, of what my thing is, and it's 88 pages. And so some people, many, I'd say about half stick it all the way through, and then they get rewarded with that, and they enjoy it. But then either they're the people who get into it who would not want to see that, who look at this sort of older superhero, supervillain, younger superhero thing and be like, ew, that's icky. Are you promoting that kind of relationship? And it's like, well, actually, my whole story is about overcoming trauma and with the help of your friends and discovering your power, having to explain that, it's not like you can be sitting next to the reader do that. So they will abandon the comic in the first 8 pages. Or just as bad, there's the people like, this is older superhero, younger supervillain, chicka chicka bow wow, I'm in, I want to see that. And then they get to, the supervillain actually really is a supervillain. And
well, I also think that it's also, a lot of it, the response you're getting is because we've been teased as a community over and over again by the big comic, publishers. Yeah. And we don't always get that through line where it actually goes there. You know what I mean? It's gotten better, but, back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid reading comics, that was unheard of. That never would have happened, Right. So I think that's one of the reasons why you sparked like you did, because there is a desire to have that and to see that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And, and on that level I deliver. Even though I'm not, intergenerational relationships aren't my shtick. That's not the thing that I'm necessarily kind of, that I'm looking to promote or kind of the stories I want to tell. Mm-hmm. The power of love, two guys getting together, and in fact, the love of between two guys making somebody heroic, and the guy getting the guy in the end, that I am very much for. Mm-hmm. And so with that, and in terms of delivering that for sort of the reasons you said, it's like, you don't want to just hint at it, wink at it, have plausible deniability, like many of the early Disney attempts, like, is he gay? Is he not gay?
Right.
You can interpret it how you want. It's like, no, it's very, these characters aren't gay first. They're heroes first, and they're real people first. Mm-hmm. But, I don't shy away from the kisses. I don't shy away from and particularly in terms of thematically, the love that they have for another guy is what makes them into a hero.
Yep, absolutely. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my question. Can you kind of, before we get too deep into the production part of it, can you kind of give us a quick rundown of some of the main characters in Young Protector so we kind of know who they are and give a flavor for the people listening and watching?
Sure. So I've already talked about Kyle. So the Young Protectors team itself, like I said, it's a young superhero team, basically ages 15 through 22 are the ages on that team. And 4 out of the 6 characters are people of color. And so we've got Kyle, who's a firebender. We've got Spooky Jones, who's the fan favorite character. He's the one who figures prominently in the later arcs. He can use magic. He's a boy who was sent to hell when he was 13 years old with no memories, no memories of his past, no memories how he got there. And he managed to learn magic and fight his way out of hell by the time he was 14. And he's a bisexual character, which is something that's important for me to show as well, because I think
sure, absolutely.
In general, particularly male bisexuals, like female bisexuals because of straight male gays and other reasons, we've seen some relatively decent examples. I'm sure not as satisfactory as it should be, but with bisexual male protagonists, it's like you don't see it at all. And when you do see it, it's usually to show some kind of moral ambiguity,
right.
So big shocker that that Loki himself is bisexual. It's good. It's a fascinating character. It's a great actor, but would be nice if instead of, bisexuality meaning that somebody is flexible, also morally flexible, then in fact, it's coming from a place of love and, the kind of experiences I have. So anyway, so that's Spooky Jones, who he's not thin, he's not tall, and he's obviously not white. And he's the sexiest character in my world.
Nice.
So then there is Commander, who is the leader of the team. She's telepathic. She's the oldest member at 22. There's Fluke, who converts his own bad luck into good luck for other people. So he has karmic transference. There's Tsunami, who has water bending powers. And then the youngest member of the team is Flyboy, who has the power of flight, but he actually has a lot more power than that ordinarily seems, because anything he touches, he can carry with him and he can transfer his momentum to it.
Cool.
So he can actually be quite effective. And so in terms of the sexualities, like I said, Kyle is 100% gay. Spooky is bisexual. Commander has been with both men and women. Tsunami and Fluke are straight guys. And then Flyboy is also a gay guy.
Excellent.
You seem to have a question, Vance.
Well, I'm just thinking through that. Is there romance on the team then, or do they have romantic partners outside of the team who become plot important because there's normal people who could be in danger?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
But there is romance. There is definitely romance on the team for sure.
Okay. Just curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point to bring up, because there's fodder there, to play with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and certainly, when you fall in love with the characters, like if you write a character for 800 pages, I mean, I've been working on The Young Protector since 2011. I mean, everything in webcomics happens in slow motion. I post 2 pages a week, which is good to have that deadline, good to put that out. But, everything happens in slow motion. And so I've had lots of time to get to know the characters and fall in love with them. And so why not have them fall in love with each other every now and then? So
yeah,
nice.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Excellent. So I have one question from our creators who listen to the station. Mm-hmm. So like, say for instance, if someone has a story and they think it would make a good graphic novel, how did you walk through those steps and I don't mean, that every journey is the same, but just give some of our writers a sense of, if they wanted to get to a graphic novel or a comic book situation, from everything you went through, you talked about and that you learned from, how does one go about trying? I mean, is the first thing from a writer's perspective to turn it into a screenplay so you start to see where you need to develop? I mean, because a lot of our screenwriters that have been on the show say that screenwriting actually helps novel writing because you really sort of understand the structure of the story in a screenplay form.
Right.
So in your experience, what if you had writers in front of you say, well, gee, I'd like to do that with this story or that story that I've written, what advice would you give them?
Sure. No, I have specific advice I can give. I mean, the first thing I'd say is make sure that you really want to make a comic, like that it's a passion for you, that you really is important. Because I get requests all the time from people who are like, I want to do a TV show, and I think creating a comic would be a great way to do that. And it's a very expensive, time-consuming way to do that. It'd be better to just come up with a pitch and do that. And similar. If you're looking to build an audience for your novels, your regular prose novels, again, the best thing to do that is promote your regular prose novels. But if you have a passion, like I do, for visual storytelling, then yes, here's the kind of path that I would recommend. The cheapest way to improve any kind of, intermediate, like a script is an intermediate work, right? It's not until, whether it's film or theater or a comic, it's not done until you get other people involved, or at least it's realized, right? But it is the cheapest way to improve the quality of your story, right? It costs you nothing to improve that. So, I don't think you necessarily need to write a film screenplay, although if for me, that was my background, so that's where I started. And like the first 3 years of writing comics, that's what I would do. I'd write it in film screenplay form and then translate that into comic form. And now I just write it in straight comic script form. It's, it's its own script format. I would recommend definitely polishing that up and getting that to where you're really happy with it, because that's the cheapest way of improving your work. And in order to find out the proper form for that, I mean, I have in the back of Artifice, the graphic novel, I have script page page examples. And then also, if you are one of my patrons, I also post all my script pages on Patreon. So there's examples there. But what I learned is I think there was like the Complete Idiot's Guide to Writing a Graphic Novel or creating a graphic novel. And that's where I would start with some of those. Get a couple of those dummies guides that talk about creating graphic novels. So you can at least, because it is its own art form and it has its own rules, and it's good just to have an understanding of how that works and what you can do. Like, there are certain motions that are going to be difficult to kind of capture in a comic form. Like a single wink is fine. Multiple winks are kind of hard to do unless you're doing something almost experimental. So I would recommend doing that. There's also DC has a series of books on how to create comics.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a DC guide to penciling, the DC guide to inking.
Okay.
Inking isn't really a thing anymore because of digital. Everything's published digitally, so you don't need to have that extra layer to get good printing. But they have one for coloring and for lettering. And then there is a group of people, the Comic Craft guys, lettering the Comic Craft way. I really recommend that as a way to for lettering your comics. So read those books, kind of get sort of the background for them, and then put energy into script. And then once you are ready and you feel really comfortable with where you are, then if you're a writer and you're not an artist, which I'm not an artist, then you're going to look to hire an artist. And this is something that's very important to make clear. It's like a lot of writers come in saying, oh, we'll do it as a collaboration, or the person will get paid on the back end.
No, they have to eat.
They have to eat, and creating art is hard work.
Yes,
writing is hard work too. And one of the things you have to accept is that there's sort of, the pendulum swings back and forth on this depending where you are, but the pendulum often swings to the way that writers kind of do nothing and artists do everything, and artists are, and writers don't deserve much credit for whatever. That's not true. But it's also not true to think that art is easy. I mean, typically to do a page of line work, you're looking at 8 or 10 hours of work just on that, right? And paying on the back end, whether you don't see this so much with like novels or whatever else, but that's a real thing that a lot of artists get exploited with. That they get promised like money in the back end. There's no money on the back end. It's just not going to happen. So, for me, I've always been very clear that I pay my artists up front. Those are the terms that I do.
You commission them.
I commission them. I pay a full rate and complete. I say, look, this is all the money there's ever going to be. So we're paying you a full rate for this. And to look for that, that depends how much you're going to pay, but you should be thinking like on the very low end, and we're not talking about the kind of art that I commission. At the very low end, you're looking at least $60 to $80 a page. If you're wanting to do what I'm doing, then you're well north of that. Like you're in the hundreds of dollars a page, and that's something that you would have to budget. And so that's something to bear in mind when you're doing your script. There's a reason I only did 15 pages for my first script, right?
If anything will pare down your story, it'll be that.
and that in itself, like you talked about before, like script writing being a useful exercise for a novelist. When I was creating scripts for short films, like I'd have to pay for it. Like every page is a minute, right? And every minute costs thousands of dollars, or at least hundreds, And so that's a real good incentive to be tight, to be pithy, right? So then it would be looking for artists. And so there are places online to do that. Look, like there's if you're looking for the high-end stuff, then look for the places where concept artists are. So when concept art, for people who don't know, it's stuff like Magic the Gathering art. It's like stuff you see for video games. That's where sort of the highest level kind of stuff is. And then, but there's also places like DeviantArt you can check out. There's a place called Digital Webbing, which is a good way to connect with artists outside of the country, which is where you're going to get more of your bargains. Again, there's a floor. You get what you pay for, right? But, you're going to pay about half as much for hiring somebody outside of the country than somebody inside of the United States. So what you'll do is you will post up a listing. I recommend knowing what your budget is before you even post that listing, and be upfront about what your page rate is. Don't say, we'll negotiate it, or it's based upon an experience. One, that's a little sleazy. And two, the difference is like, I know people have just posted up like, paid based on experience, and they might get like 3 or 4 responses, I listed my page rate, you know, and I got on the very first comic, I got 300 responses.
Wow.
People, you know, and you ask to see their portfolio. I mean, and again, be very clear what the comic is. The more clear you are, the better results you're going to get. Be very clear what the comic is. Be very clear what your expectations are, what you want to see, and what you're going to want to see are finished pages of sequential art. Like if all they have are pinups, I mean, that's great, but creating sequential art. It's its own thing, you know. It's sort of the difference between, you know, somebody who's a still photographer and somebody who's a cinematographer. I mean, it's a different. There's overlap, but there's some different skill sets there that you need to learn in order to tell a story that moves through panels. So, and then you go through it, and then you kind of, what I did is I pared it down to 5 of my best takes, and then I gave them a page of my comic, an actual page from the comic, and I contracted with them. And this is something that I also think is really important, is that you have a contract right from the beginning. And if you're doing what I'm doing, it's going to be a work for hire contract that basically protects you, protects the artist, protects everything, makes it very clear what your obligations are. And then I did is I contracted it like it was a real job. So I said, hey, look, you're going to get paid this test page. Like artists will do a test page for you for free. You know, that's not the kind of relationship I want to develop with an artist. You know, if an artist does work for me, that they get paid. And so, you know, in terms of that, like I contract with them, they get paid for it. I say, look, I'm going to want a single pass and 2 revisions on this. That's my expectation, up to 2 revisions. Because if you don't need the revisions, then you don't, you know, get out of the way, like I said, you know. And then, you know, hopefully, if the stars align, there will be somebody there who will be the right fit for your work. And then you contract with them. You use the same contract, but make it for a longer period of time. You go through the process together. I go through a process of thumbnail sketches. You know, this is where I can ask for the big changes. This is where, you know, if there's a misunderstanding in my script, I do my best to be clear, right? But, you know, I have stuff in my brain and you try to translate it. And if it's somebody like Adam DeCrocker, who's worked with me for 10 years, like he can kind of, he knows what I'm going for with, and the gags and all that. But if it's a new artist, they might be like, I thought you meant that. So this is where you make the big changes because they're only doing rough sketches. So that's where I might ask for a couple revisions on it for sure. And then after that, then you ask for the completed line work. And that hopefully, you know, at most a revision, you know, maybe 2 if you really need to. But at that point, you're not asking for big changes. You're basically asking for subtle expression stuff that wouldn't show up in the thumbs. Like, can you make his smile more sinister? I don't think it's clear what's in his head there, whatever, right? I mean, this is a place, like, I think both of you are actors. Like, in a screenplay, you don't want to give acting directions. But for a comic, you do. You know? I mean, there is room you want to give your artist to create, but I think you definitely do want, if you're not going to be in the moment directing them.
Especially if the plot point is, like you say, in that, you know, that sardonic smile or whatever, you want to make sure that gets conveyed, because may not be, you know, visually written wise conveyed. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you have to kind of you need to go more that direction, because that'll put it across, you know.
I mean, that's exactly it. And if you're lucky to work with somebody like the team I work with, they can do really subtle stuff. So I can do subtext. Like I can have the character say one thing, but mean another thing.
But visually, it says something else. Yes. Okay.
And so you know, we go through that process of line work, and then sometimes you'll work with somebody who will color their own work. And in my case,
I have a friend who does that. He's in Spain, and he does the whole 9 yards. So is that page rate then like what you would budget for a line artist and a colorist? So basically you say, this is what, you know, because you would already pay for a line artist for this much and pay for a colorist for this much. So if they're doing both, you just kind of say that's your page rate for them, right?
And I don't look for like a discount. You know, it's sort of like it's I have the budget for line work and coloring, and they just get all of it at that point. You know, and I have worked with a couple artists, like Winona was like that. Like I said, you know, there's other artists who've done side comics. You know, in my like Julie Wright, who's done some side comics for the Young Protectors, she does that from line work all through colors. But most of my work is done with Veronica Gandini, who does separate colors. And so at that point, you might or might not pay for somebody, an additional person called a flatter, who will go through and actually fill in each of the big areas of the line work with flat color. And what that does is that's not a creative process. That just helps the colorist who works digitally, like in Photoshop, easily select areas. It saves them a lot of time. So that, you know, that might be $10 or $15 a page to get somebody to flat the pages. And then and then the colorist does the color work. And then in my case, it comes back to me. Or you could hire a letterer. That's another person you can hire. But for me, particularly because I'm the writer and I might do some final dialogue tweaks based on what I see in the art or whatever. I mean, I stick pretty close because my artist and I work pretty closely together, and we hew pretty close to scripts. But I might want a last minute tweak, and I can do it. I do the lettering in Illustrator. So you just put all the word balloons and the sound effects in Illustrator, and then I compile it all in InDesign, and then I publish it. I create it in a format that can then be put on the web as a webcomic page, and then eventually it's compiled in what's called a PDF-X, which is sent off to my printer to do the actual printing. So,
excellent.
Very cool.
Does that
I
answer
know
your
a
question?
number of our writers who are some of our people who patron us and listen to us. I know they found that part of your discussion very valuable, because a lot of them have offline told us, oh yeah, I've thought about doing that, but I don't know where to go or how to start, so thank you for that. A number of our authors out there are going, oh, gold mine.
Well, and I think, and I would suggest, like, if you're really
but I
interested,
also like that you warned them that they have to be passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's excellent.
It's tough to get rich in comics. I mean, it's nearly impossible, and it's really hard in gay comics. And I'm very lucky that I make my living doing this. I mean, so I feel very lucky. But there's easier ways to make money, people, and there's easier ways with writing to make money. Like if you're a writer and you can work your way up to rapid release, that you can make a lot more money than what I'm doing. One thing I would say is, if you are going down this path, I would really recommend that you consider releasing your work as a webcomic. A lot of creators, and particularly actually in the comic world, they're really concerned about piracy. Mm-hmm. But when you're a beginning creator, your issue is not piracy, it's obscurity. And so you want to be able to release, build an audience. And the best way to do that, in my experience, is to release your work for free. And particularly on a regular basis, be a destination, so that you're posting a couple pages a week, and then there's a comment section underneath, so you can build a community, so people can show up. It becomes a destination. They talk to each other. Like, there's a whole thing, like, my readers come and they camp on the page in the comment section the night before and talk to each other. And that's the kind of way you can build momentum that can actually turn into a career eventually.
Nice.
Excellent.
So I know we briefly just mentioned patronage. Do you only use Patreon, or do you use a couple sources?
Okay, so, well, are we talking in the before times, or are we talking in the pandemic times? So in the before times, comic conventions were actually a significant source of my income, for sure.
Okay.
Thanks to COVID, that's off the menu for me, right? So what I've had to do is I've had to, in terms of that other piece that was there, I've had to figure out a way to have sales on my online store, which was basically, back before I figured this out, I mean, I was like making 2 sales a season, and I've just kind of cracked that nut just this year. And so now, I'm making 20 to 30 sales a month, and things are going in a good direction with that. But the most of my income, to be honest with you, is on Patreon. And I am very lucky that I have a super loyal reader base who have been with me through thick and thin. I've had readers who've supported at the $25 a month level for 6 years. The target I shoot for that is $5 a month. I think that's a sustainable level. And there's been people who supported me for 6 years, obviously, on that, for a bunch of people who've done that. And I feel very grateful for that. And having that stable income is useful. So that is essentially how I'm making my living doing this. Okay.
Is there anything else about either Artifice or the Young Protectors that you want people to know?
Well, like I said, you can read it all for free online.
Right. We'll provide the links for everybody to see.
Yep. And in fact, we can maybe put the link down there. There's an email tour that people can join, and that will actually not only hold your hand throughout the process, because there's over 800 pages of comics. So it's good to kind of get some context and kind of be introduced to it slowly and be brought along, but it also has discounts on my books and other merchandise in my store. And you even, if you sign up, you even get like a free pack of these prints. Because I had a Kickstarter for the Young Protectors that I asked for $14,000, and it kind of took off, and I kept adding extra rewards to it, which is a whole other thing to talk about whether that's a good idea. But it wound up getting up to $133,000. So I had all this kind of cool merchandise that I wound up making that I'm very excited about. And if you sign up for this particular tour, you can get sent one of the print packs, high quality print packs for just the cost of shipping. So
nice.
Excellent.
And that is at signup.alexwoolfson.com.
yes, signup.alexwoolfson.com. Pay attention to the 2 O's after the W, because people sort of like Son of Virginia Woolf for those who are writer
Nice.
types.
There you go.
Nice
There you go.
reference.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. And which social site is the best for people to follow you?
Which social site is the best for people to follow me? I mean, here's the truth. I mean, I do all of them. I do respond a bit more on Facebook, because the way I turned around sort of my store sales was teaching myself the black art of Facebook ads. And so, in terms of that, I mean, so I tend to respond more to that, because I'm responding also to the ads.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth
that's how I found you, was on Facebook.
Exactly. I mean, finally cracking that particular nut with the advertising. There's I could talk to you guys literally for 40 minutes about advertising. I could talk to you about how to succeed at Kickstarter, how to come up with a Patreon campaign that's going to be successful. There's all these things that, you kind of learn along the way. But in terms of actually spending time on social media platforms, I think they're dangerous. I think it's really easy to get sucked into them. And I would rather spend that time writing and working with my artists. So really the best way is to go to my website and comment under my pages, because that's sort of the best way, and or be a patron, obviously. I mean, I respond to all my patrons, but that's the sort of the social media that I'm actually most present on.
That's awesome, actually.
Yep.
All right. Well, any final words of wisdom?
Any final words of wisdom? I mean, all my words of wisdom, the stuff you've already heard, which is that, write stuff and finish it.
Nice.
I think, I was watching some of your previous podcasts, and one of the questions one person brought up is like, what makes somebody an author, right? And is it your readership? Is it getting published and all that? I think being an author is you create something and you finish it. That's what being an author ultimately is.
Exactly. I'm right there with you on that one.
And don't be afraid to move on to the next thing. I mean, always finish. I mean, this is the most important thing. Don't go halfway and go to the next thing. Finish what you're doing. But, one of the important lessons I've learned is that it can be easy. I'm a perfectionist. And so one of my big mantras is perfection is the enemy of the good. Perfection is the enemy of done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it can be very easy for me to polish. Like my first short film, I polished for, I think, 10 years. I mean, it's embarrassing even to think of that. When really the thing to do is once it's done, once you've put a bow on it and it's good enough, it's good, it's publishing quality, it's good enough for readers, move on to the next thing. That's how you grow as a writer. And yeah, don't be afraid to try the next thing. I guess that would sort of be my words of wisdom.
There you go.
I like
Excellent.
it. All right. This was Written on the Edge. The Rote Podcast is produced by Row Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Alex Woolfson for being with us today. Alex, thank you so much.
Well,
thank you for that.
Very much my pleasure.
Thank you for that episode 1 of the masterclass of Do I Want to Do This?
Right. You know what? Shout out to Masterclass. Hire this guy and have him do a masterclass for comics. There you go.
There you go. All right, folks. Head over to signup.alexwoolfson.com, 2 O's in Wolfson, and start your journey through his comics. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.